On August 20, 1966, a boy was flying a kite on a hill overlooking Rio de Janeiro. He noticed two men lying in the tall grass near the top of the slope. They were wearing suits. They were wearing raincoats. And over their eyes, each man wore a mask made of lead. The boy ran to get help. When police finally reached the bodies the following day, they found one of the strangest crime scenes in Brazilian history. Two men, side by side, neatly positioned as though they had simply laid down to rest. No visible injuries. No signs of a struggle. No indication of how they had died. But beside them, investigators found a notebook. And in that notebook was a set of handwritten instructions that turned this case from a mystery into something far more disturbing. The note read, 16:30, be at the specified location. 18:30, ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals. Await signal. Mask. Nearly 60 years later, nobody knows what signal they were waiting for. Nobody knows what they ingested. And nobody knows why they were wearing lead masks on a hilltop in Brazil. The two men were identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz, age 32, and Miguel José Viana, age 34. They were electronics technicians from Campos dos Goitacazes, a small city about 270 kilometers northeast of Rio de Janeiro. Both were married. Both had families. Both had steady work repairing televisions and radios. By every account, they were ordinary men living ordinary lives. On the morning of August 17, 3 days before their bodies were found, Cruz and Viana told their families they needed to travel to São Paulo to buy materials for work and possibly a car. This was not unusual. Electronics technicians in 1960s Brazil often traveled to larger cities for components. Their families saw nothing strange about the trip. But they did not go to São Paulo. They boarded a bus to Niteroi, a city directly across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. They arrived at roughly 2:30 in the afternoon. What they did next was methodical. They purchased 2 identical raincoats from a shop in Niteroi. They bought a bottle of mineral water from a local bar. And they kept the receipt, which suggests they planned to return the bottle for the deposit later. They expected to come back. The bartender who served them remembered Viana clearly. She told police he was visibly nervous. He kept checking his watch. He seemed to be counting down to something. That was the last time anyone saw Cruz and Viana alive. Their bodies were found 3 days later on the Morro do Vintém, a steep, scrub-covered hill on the outskirts of Niteroi. The climb to the spot where they died is difficult. It is not a place you end up by accident. Whoever goes there goes on purpose. When police arrived, the scene was pristine. No blood. No torn clothing. No defensive wounds. The two men lay side by side in their suits and raincoats. Their lead masks were crude, handmade from strips of metal shaped into simple eye coverings, like improvised welding goggles. The masks were designed to block out light. Next to the bodies were the empty water bottle, a packet containing 2 wet towels, and the notebook with those 5 lines of instructions. A small amount of cash was also found. Nothing had been stolen. The most critical piece of evidence in the case was never obtained. By the time the coroner performed the autopsy, weeks had passed. The tropical heat had decomposed the internal organs beyond reliable analysis. Toxicology testing was never completed. Whatever capsules Cruz and Viana ingested, whatever substance may have killed them, the answer rotted away before anyone could measure it. The official cause of death was never determined. To understand what might have driven 2 electronics technicians to a hilltop with lead masks and a set of cryptic instructions, investigators looked into their personal lives. What they found was not what they expected. Cruz and Viana were not simply television repairmen. According to Cruz's wife, both men were deeply involved in what she called scientific spiritualism, a fringe practice that blended pseudoscience, electronics, and the occult. They believed they could build devices to contact extraterrestrial beings or communicate with spirits from other dimensions. They were not alone in this. They had a close friend named Elcio Gomez who shared their interests. The three of them had conducted experiments together, building electronic devices they believed could attract or detect otherworldly signals. On at least one occasion, one of their devices exploded in Cruz's backyard. On another, the group claimed they tested a device on a beach and witnessed a bright explosion in the sky. These were not men dabbling casually. They were committed believers. The lead mask suddenly made sense in this context. If Cruz and Viana believed they were about to make contact with something that would produce blinding light, the masks were protection. The note's instructions, after the effect, protect metals, await signal, mask, read like a ritual protocol. Arrive at the location. Take the capsules. Wait for the contact event. Shield your eyes. They had done this before. And on August 17, 1966, they climbed Vintém Hill to do it again. Only this time, whatever they took killed them. But that explanation, as tidy as it appears, still leaves enormous questions unanswered. What were the capsules? If they were psychedelic drugs, which some investigators have suggested, why did both men die? A simultaneous lethal overdose from recreational substances is extremely rare. And if the capsules were poison, why would two men with families voluntarily take it? There was no evidence of suicidal intent. They kept the receipt for the water bottle. They expected to return. Then there is the matter of Elcio Gomez, the third member of the group. Police interviewed Gomez, who gave contradictory accounts of his relationship with the dead men. Cruz's wife told investigators that Gomez had recently argued with her husband. But there was no physical evidence linking Gomez to the hilltop, and he was never charged. A fourth man entered the investigation briefly. Hamilton Bazzani approached police and confessed that he had helped rob and murder Cruz and Viana. He claimed he and an accomplice had met the two men at a spiritualism center, lured them to Niteroi, and forced them at gunpoint to take poison. He even quoted his accomplice as saying, "We have killed them both." But police could not verify any part of Bazzani's story. No physical evidence supported it. No accomplice was ever identified. The confession was dismissed. What remains is a case with no cause of death, no confirmed motive, and no suspects. Only two dead men in suits on a hilltop, wearing masks made of lead, with a notebook full of instructions for a ritual that may have been their last. There is one more detail that is almost never mentioned in English-language coverage of this case. Cruz and Viana were not the first to die this way in that area. In 1962, for years before the lead masks case, a different electronics technician was found dead on the same hilltop. He too was wearing a lead mask. His death was also unexplained. If that earlier death was connected to the same group, the same beliefs, the same experiments, then the lead masks case may not have been an isolated incident. It may have been part of a pattern. A pattern of people climbing that hill, expecting to make contact with something beyond understanding, and never coming back down alive. Vintém Hill still stands on the outskirts of Niteroi. It is overgrown and rarely visited. The case file remains open. The toxicology results that might have explained everything were never obtained. And the signal that Cruz and Viana were waiting for, whatever it was, never came. Or perhaps it did. If this case disturbed you, you might want to hear about Frederick Valentic, the Australian pilot who radioed air traffic control to report a UFO and was never heard from again. That episode is on the channel now. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I cover the cases the world forgot.